Game 1, Vygodchikov vs. Alekhine. Correspondence, Russia, 1908 to 1909. Alekhine's black. Let's get to the first critical moment. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, Ruy Lopez, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle, and now bishop c5. In 1908, Danish master Müller suggested this move, and indeed it is much better than its reputation, Alekhine writes. It has been in no way refuted, and the few games which it has been adopted in rather tend to militate in its favor. In the game, white plays knight takes e5. Another move is c3, and after c3, the best response is bishop a7, and in Yates' Alekhine, it continues d4. Rook e1 is not a good move. Can you see why? The best response is knight to g4, attacking f2. After knight g4, white should probably retreat his rook back to f1. But if d4, then black can take, and after c takes d4, black has another tactical shot. Can you see it? Knight takes d4. Because after knight takes d4, black has, can you see it? Queen h4, attacking h2 and f2, and white can resign in this position. That's why d4 first, which was played in Yates versus Alekhine. After d4, it continued knight takes e4, queen to e2, f5, d takes e5, castle, knight bd2, d5. Interesting move, because after en passant, he retreats, or not really retreat, he backpedals his knight to d6. Okay, bishop b3, h3, or king h8, knight to c4, and black plays the aggressive f4, knight c to e5. Does trading the knights favor black? Yes. Every time you make a trade, you gain some sort of tempo. So knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and this tempo is important to sustain the attacking chances and to assure that you have all the time in the world. Queen to g5, bishop d2, bishop h3, bishop d5, rook a e8, rook fe1, and black played a stunning move. Can you find it? Rook e6. Yeah, he's going to play rook fe8 to exploit the pin on e5, and then maybe also bring the rook to g6, maybe after rook e8, so that the knight stays pinned. After rook e6, it continued queen to d3, breaking the pin, and black can take the knight on e5, but the bishop on h3 is hanging. The best move in this position is bishop takes g2, and after bishop takes g2, only then rook takes e5. And this way, black wins a pawn. In the game itself, Alekhine played bishop e3 in inaccuracy, and the game went on to be a draw. Bishop e3 doesn't quite work, although black still holds a slight advantage. If I remember correctly, the best response is f takes e3, and the point is that after f3, which looks dangerous as hell, you're just attacking everything, you cut off the bishop, right? Well, white's going to take, and you may think, okay, rook takes f3, and it's reasonable for white, right? But white has one move that saves the game and parries like all of black's threats. The only move that can be played in this position is queen to e2, suddenly holding everything together. And this would be a draw, well, with perfect play. Let's go back to the main game. So, instead of c3, white played knight takes e5, and now knight takes e5, d4. What did black play here? Can you see it? Well, it's not really a tactic, but it's written with an exclamation mark. Knight takes e4 appears to be the best. In the game it was rook e1, but d takes c5 deserves attention. What happens would be knight takes c5, queen to d4, queen d5 leads to the same after queen e7 in both cases, and after bishop f4, black can play f6, which is totally fine in this position, and white has insufficient compensation for the pawn. I guess because despite the bishop pair advantage, black may be able to change the structure or the material balance through dynamic means like knight e6 to trade back one of the bishops. So, after d4, after knight takes e4, are there any other moves? Well, into Cax versus Alekhine, it went queen e2, and Alekhine plays bishop e7, queen takes e4, knight to g6, pawn c4, castle, knight c3, f5. He writes that black has good attacking chances, and we can just briefly look at the game. I'm not going to focus attention on the moves, but queen f3, knight h4, queen d3, b5, bishop b3, king h8, bishop f4, knight g6, bishop d2, bishop b7, rook fe1, b takes, bishop takes, d5, bishop b3, c5, exclamation mark, d takes c5, d4, knight a4, bishop e4, queen c4, bishop g5, queen c1, bishop takes, trade, knight h4, f3, bishop takes f3, g3. Now we reach a critical moment. Black can win with interesting attacking idea. The best move is f4. And after g takes h4, there is queen takes h4, and so basically rook f6 followed by rook g6 is coming. So if white plays bishop c2, which looks very reasonable, then black has a nice move, d3. The point is that after bishop takes d3, rook a d8 is decisive advantage for black, exploiting the pin. And obviously queen takes d3 runs into queen g4, so this is losing for white. Let's go back to the main game. Okay, instead of queen to e2, it was rook e1, bishop e7, rook takes e4, knight to g6, knight c3, castle, knight d5, and here we reach another critical moment. Black plays bishop d6 with an exclamation mark. On one hand, you do block the pawn on d7, which is slightly bad for coordination from a static point of view, but it was important to preserve the bishop. Black has no opening difficulties really, and the highest chance of players of both skill is that this will lead to an equal middle game. White plays queen to f3. If c4, then he writes that f5, rook e1, and c5 is strong. But then he later criticizes this move, saying that d takes c5, bishop takes c5, b4, bishop a7, and queen h5 is almost a decisive advantage for white because of bishop g5, and also bishop b3 followed by c5 is coming. So after c4, okay, rook e1. After c4, the best move is b5. He writes this is equal. So bishop d6. In the game it was queen f3, f5. He writes that this advance is premature because white gains an important tempo by playing his light squared bishop to b3, where black loses the chance of c5 due to the discoveries. The correct plan, he writes, is b5, and after bishop b3, bishop b7, with very good chances for black. So, f5. White does not need to immediately move the rook. White played bishop b3, and it was king h8, because if you take the rook, then white mates in 4. First, it's a double check, knight to e7, and after king h8, knight takes g6, leads to a mate in 2 after h takes g6, queen h3, queen h4, and queen takes h4. This would be checkmate. So, instead of f takes e4, it was king h8, rook e2, and now f4. This prepares c6. If queen h4, then h3, queen takes d4, c3, queen c5, bishop e3, queen c6, all leads to a very strong attacking chance for white after bishop d4. So it was f4, c4, c6. By playing c6, it's different than playing c5, which would lead to a rook sacrifice, or an attempt to do so, but there's bishop c2. And to illustrate white's point, let's say queen to g5, there's going to be d takes c5, knight to h4. Suddenly, white can white can play an active defense with queen to g3. That's because there's this, and also bishop hangs and the knight hangs. So white is okay. So c6 it was, c5, bishop b8, knight b6, and now critical moment. Most players might play rook a7 automatically, but this is a battle of time. Alekhine plays d5. Best move, double exclamation mark. The rook sacrifice is absolutely sound in his words, and white would have been advised to take the bishop instead of the rook, which he did in the game. Because after taking the bishop, basically, after queen takes c8, bishop c2, the position is maybe even a slight advantage for white. Just the bishop pair and black's coordination is slightly wonky, although you could argue that c1 bishop is also pretty bad on white's camp. So it's maybe slight advantage for white, but definitely better than knight takes a8 as played in the game, allowing a massive amount of activity to come. First it was knight to h4, and now queen c3. There's other queen moves possible, for example queen to h5. g6 is a good move here, queen to h6, and now knight to f5 attacking d4. Good position for black. Another try is queen d3, kind of like provoking bishop f5 and then playing queen c3, but after, so bishop f5, queen c3, and f3, rook e3 is interesting, but let's backtrack a little, talk about queen d1 here. After queen d1, there's queen g5, a strong move, and now because the queen's on the first rank instead of the third rank, he cannot laterally defend against f3, like right here, pawn push. That's why queen is better on c3. So queen c3, f3 is a good move. And now, why rook e3? Why not g takes f3? Well, after g takes f3, he includes queen to f6, f4, bishop g4, and this position is decisive advantage for black. So rook e3, f takes g2. He's got some ideas of queen g5 and maybe knight f3 coming soon. f3, queen g5, rook e5, bishop takes, a brilliant queen sacrifice, because after bishop takes g5, he can win the queen back via bishop takes d4, take, and knight f3, and after king takes, knight takes d4. And we can see that after knight b6, there's bishop e4, king g3, rook f3, king h4, and bishop f5, and mate is incoming. It's not so much about the material as it is about white's problems regarding his king. Alekhine was brilliant in this manner, somehow setting up position at least 10 moves ahead so that it's all dynamically working in his favor and the king cannot escape. So knight h4. In the game it was queen c3, f3, and rook e5. This move is compulsory. If rook e3, then queen g5, g3, and now bishop takes g3. A pretty sacrifice because it's a double sacrifice. After h takes, you're going to take on g3 again with the queen. And the point is that there's f2 and bishop h3 is coming. After this, it's basically game over. King e2, f1 queen. So he had to play in a way to sacrifice some material in order to dumb down black's initiative. He takes bishop e5, d takes e5, and knight takes g2. Black has two maneuvers in general in this position. The first one is highlighted in arrows, queen h4, queen h3, and then knight f4 would be coming in that case. Another maneuver is basically almost identical. It is queen d7, queen h3. White plays queen to d4. Okay, let's see what happens after knight f4. This was not played in the game, but it looks logical. You're going to play queen g5, right? The problem is it's not the best. However, after take and queen h4, it is also winning. In the game it was queen d7, and white played a desperate move, e6. I guess he foresaw that after a move like king h1 parrying, queen h3 kind of, and queen g4, there's just queen h3 anyway, and this time your knight is going to go to e1 and blocking some first rank defense as well. So allowing like a double threat of queen f1 and queen g2. e6. Queen takes e6, and bishop d2, and queen g6, exclamation mark. He writes that it's stronger than queen h3 because after bishop c3, white is sort of counterattacking the king. Let's say rook g8, queen e5, and now it's hard for black to be sure that he can properly evaluate this position as winning. But after knight f4 and queen g5, Alekhine corrects himself and notes that h6 is still a decisively winning position for black, where white could just resign. So queen g6, better from a practical point of view, and it was bishop c2, giving up the bishop. If king h1, then we can play knight e1, the same idea kind of, and if king f1, then bishop h3 should win very quickly. Just knight e3 is coming. So bishop c2, kind of like trading one piece for one tempi. Queen takes c2, he accepts it, and king h1. Now he goes back, queen to g6. Rook g1 was played. This is necessary, but still not enough. After bishop h3, knight to b6, and knight f4. Another brilliant queen sacrifice. In fact, Alekhine foresaw this and prepared it around 4 moves ago at least. And if the queens exchange, white's endgame is completely losing. It continued, rook takes g6, bishop g2, rook takes g2, pawn takes, king g1, knight e2, forking, king takes g2, knight takes d4, and after this moment, white resigns because material advantage for black is overwhelming, and black has no problems with king safety or structure. Everything is beautiful for black. Just the way Alekhine plays, very much mixing tactical ideas with positional ideas, kind of playing on both sides of the board, and just playing for very clean endgames with very concrete, beautiful combinational sacrifices.